CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Global Business Europe, live from CGTN in London. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Juliet Van. Our top stories. The world's biggest political gathering ends as China signs off on its future direction for the coming years.
China plans sweeping changes to Hong Kong's electoral system, but some Western countries condemn the move.
A year of the pandemic, but is the end in sight yet?
And the EU approves America's Johnson & Johnson single-shot jab, just as some European countries suspend the AstraZeneca vaccine. The world's biggest annual political gathering has come to an end in Beijing. The Chinese Premier Li Keqiang met the press following the conclusion of the week-long Two Sessions event. The country's premier has been talking to international journalists. CGTN's Tui Huiyao reports.
2021 marks the beginning of a new 5-year development plan for the country. Lawmakers also gave the go-ahead for the details of the 14th 5-year plan and long-term development goals by 2035. The NPC also approved the government work report, which set China's GDP growth target at about 6% this year. Premier Li said the target took into consideration of global uncertainties while allowing possibilities of a robust recovery.
We must avoid wide swings in economic performance because that will disrupt market expectations. Growth that is too fast will not be steady. A steady pace is needed for sustained development. So what we hope for such a big economy as China's is sustained and sound long-term growth.
On China-U.S. relations, Premier Li said that disagreements and differences are unavoidable, but the two countries share common interests. He said both sides should respect each other's core interests and major concerns and focus on cooperation rather than confrontation. Experts say this year's Two Sessions carries extra weight because through the 14th 5-year plan, it is setting the tone for the country's next stage of development. Cu Huiyao, CGTN, at the Great Hall of the People in Beijing.
Bert Hoffman is the former country director for China at the World Bank. I asked him what the world should take away from the Two Sessions.
China shifting gear from crisis management to development. Last year was clearly a year to fight the COVID crisis, and China's done really well. That's why they came out with positive growth. But this year, the emphasis is more on the longer term, especially with the presentation of the 14th 5-year plan, which is going to lay out the development for the next 5 years and even for the next 15 years.
So what does that all mean in terms of investment opportunity, internationally and at home?
Well, the main strategy for China for the medium term is the dual circulation strategy. And that's a big word, but breaking it down, it means relying more on domestic demand, specifically consumption demand, relying more on domestic supply chains, and relying more on domestic innovation. So 3 prongs in that strategy. The consumer demand is probably a very important one for investors to look at. They say, well, you can benefit from China's growth if you focus on that consumer demand. But also, you can benefit from China if you know how to invest in the critical supply chains within China. So as foreign direct investor in China, you have opportunities to be present in China as well.
A lot of opportunity then for foreign investors. Are there any particular companies that you think are going to seize that opportunity?
Well, I think the Europeans are quite keen. The Europeans do a lot of production in China, and with the comprehensive agreement on investment, they believe that they have a bit more freedom. There's already a lot of companies that are present, and car companies and chemical companies are probably going to do quite well.
Let's talk about China's growth, because the Premier Li Keqiang, he defended China's modest growth targets, if you like. What's your take on the pace of recovery?
Well, look, I think China's well on track. The target as announced for this year is 6% or more. That's to some extent modest, because if China stops growing now, if it just keeps the level of GDP that it had at the end of last year, it would already reap 6% growth. So in that sense, it is, if you want, it's a bottom. Premier Li Keqiang says, look, we shouldn't aim too high because it will tie us down too much. And we need the flexibility. There's still lots of uncertainties out there. COVID is not over in the rest of the world, so we don't know exactly about domestic demand. And of course, there's also geopolitical tensions with the US. Next week, a big meeting to see whether those tensions will come down. But the first signs of the Biden administration are that some of those will remain, and therefore there's a lot of uncertainty. And being a bit conservative is not a bad thing.
China's legislature has approved a resolution to make sweeping changes to Hong Kong's electoral system. The move will give Beijing loyalists, or patriots as they're called, those considered to have the best interests of the city at heart, a stronger voice. It will see the election committee, which is responsible for nominating candidates and electing the chief executive, expanded from 1,200 members to 1,500. The Legislative Council is also being boosted from 70 members to 90. And a candidate qualification review committee will be established to vet candidates for election to Hong Kong's parliament.
The Chinese Premier says the decision to change the electoral system of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region will help ensure long-term stability and development in the city.
The purpose of the decision is clear. It is to adhere to and improve the systemic structure of one country, two systems, uphold the principle of patriots administering Hong Kong, and ensure steady implementation of one country, two systems.
Well, various governments around the world have expressed alarm at the changes in Hong Kong, but Chinese officials have defended the move. Let's talk to CGTN's Andrew Wilson, who's following the global reaction. Andrew, how is this playing out in the international community?
Well, we already heard just now, Jamie, the World Bank point of view, which is that China is gunning for it this year. The Two Sessions Council very much more pushing towards development, towards the future, towards the determination of where China's going to go economically and politically in the next 5 years. And so it's keen, clearly, to put a lid on any problematic issues. One of those, of course, is Hong Kong. So now we have this, what they call a resolution for the patriots governing Hong Kong. And as you say, those 35 members of the Legislative Council that would traditionally have been up for election, which is where that small cadre of people who supported some of the demonstrations came from, they are still up for election but now go through a vetting committee. And bear in mind that the lawmakers in Hong Kong by and large refer to those who supported the demonstrations of the last 3 or 4 years as being traitors. So their chances of getting onto the council now are virtually zero. This passed, by the way, in Beijing with a majority of 2,895 to 0. So that's moved swiftly through the Beijing Council and then will now be approved by the Hong Kong legislature under the leadership of Carrie Lam. She, bear in mind, is now also chair of the Committee for Safeguarding National Security, a position brought in with the new national security law in 2020. This is what she had to say today.
The central authorities take the initiatives from the national level to improve the system, aiming to ensure a number of objectives, having considered the actual situation. We all know what the actual situation is. The objective is to ensure that Hong Kong can stay true to the original aspiration in implementing the principle of one country, two systems, and get back on the right track, and to ensure that patriots will be administering Hong Kong.
Well, Carrie Lam referring there to one country, two systems. Clearly, Beijing believes that the one country part of that is more important, whereas perhaps here in the UK they believe the two systems is the more important part of that phrase, with the UK pointing out that the pro-democracy protests were indeed supported by perhaps as many as 2 million of Hong Kong's 7 million population. It's a bit early for the UK to respond. There have been questions already raised in Parliament. Clearly, of course, there's going to be expressions of dismay. The government thinks it's too early for Magnitsky Act-type sanctions to be levied against individuals, but the two sessions double week has raised an awful lot of issues which put pressure on Downing Street in one way or another. Dominic Raab has been vocal. His response to this decision over Hong Kong so far has been to say this is the latest step by Beijing to hollow out the space for democratic debate in Hong Kong and further undermine confidence and trust in China living up to its international responsibilities and legal obligations. A lot of tension there clearly between Downing Street, Westminster and Beijing. Tension also in Europe and tension in the United States. Now there's this meeting next week in Anchorage in Alaska between Wang Yi, Foreign Minister for the Chinese government, and Antony Blinken, Secretary of State for the United States. The fact that it's taking place in Anchorage is a sign of the tensions. Nobody's visiting anyone's capital. They've got a lot to talk about, and Hong Kong, of course, will be one of those. As far as Europe's concerned, it's a little more sensitive because of the trade deal that's pretty much almost there now to being ratified this year between China and the European Union. Brussels is being more circumspect about what it has to say, but make no mistake, there are individual politicians within the structure of the European community and some national governments who are concerned about the direction of travel in Hong Kong and may yet bring pressure to bear on the negotiations for the trade deal. I spoke to the EU ambassador from the Chinese government the other day about the EU trade deal, and he's largely positive about it all.
The agreement is a good news. Good news for China-EU cooperation, for global economic recovery, and China's reform and opening up. The two sides will push forward the follow-up work to ensure that the Chinese and the European people and the businesses could benefit from this agreement at an early date. In developing China-EU relations, what matters most is to proceed from a common interest and make decisions independently.
China is now the largest trading partner with the EU. Who benefits from that? How does that indicate a shift in global trading trends?
China's rise as the EU's largest trading partner is encouraging development. Despite the COVID-19, China-EU economic and trade cooperation is highly resilient. The EU's trade in goods with China grew by 4.4%, the only positive growth among the EU's major trading partners. And confidence in investment is not subdued. As the world is struggling to contain the virus, it's important for China and the EU to maintain smooth flows of goods, normal operation of investment projects, and secure and stable supply chains, which is crucial for economic recovery.
With a new relationship starting with the European Union, at the same time as an old relationship, the UK and the European Union has completely changed, where does that leave the UK in its relations with China?
The UK and EU are still working on the detailed arrangements for their future relationship. And this is between the UK and the EU. China will not interfere or comment. I want to say that the CAI is an investment agreement between China and the EU, not targeting any third party. I hope the agreement will not be politicized or turned into a geopolitical issue. Our position is clear. We stand ready to work with all members of the international community to promote free trade and a mutually beneficial cooperation.
China's ambassador to the EU talking to Andrew Wilson. Well, Chinese and American officials will hold their first face-to-face talks of the Biden administration. A meeting is scheduled to be held in Alaska next week. Here's Chinese Premier Li Keqiang speaking about China-US relations during today's news conference.
Despite multiple shocks last year, China-US trade reached 4.1 trillion yuan, up by 8.8%. We should put even more energy and focus on common ground and expand our common interests.
Well, let's get more on this and talk to our correspondent, Jim Spellman, in the United States. And Jim, what can we expect from these talks in Alaska?
Well, the U.S. side says that on the agenda will be some areas of potential cooperation. This would include COVID-19 response as well as climate issues, some areas of genuine competition, mostly around trade, and then perhaps the most difficult issues, these areas of true disagreement, especially the issues that Beijing considers sensitive internal issues to China. We're talking about Xinjiang, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. Now, in recent days, we've heard Premier Li and other high-ranking Chinese officials comment that there is plenty of room in this relationship for things to improve, for there to be more cooperation. So I think the big question is going to be, to what degree will the U.S. Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, and the U.S. National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, to what degree will they focus on the areas of conflict, or will they focus on the areas of cooperation? Now, Washington is playing this down to a degree, not calling this a major reset of relations or anything, perhaps just the first chapter in this ongoing story of U.S.-China relations in the Biden administration. But clearly they would like to establish a new tone after 4 years of conflict and chaos under former President Trump. Juliet?
So establish a new tone. This is a little bit like crystal ball time, Jim. How do you expect that the world's two largest economies' relationship to develop under Biden?
Well, the more things change in Washington, the more they also seem to stay the same. So here's how Blinken put it earlier this week about these talks. He says, we'll talk about the competition we have with China to make sure that the United States has a level playing field. Sound familiar? Well, these are the same kind of dialogue that we heard of the level playing field talk under the Trump administration and under the Obama administration before that. And many of the same economic issues remain: agriculture policy, intellectual property, tech transfers, things like that. So it's not clear to what degree we're going to see major changes in the economic realm. There's big reviews going on of U.S. trade with China, U.S. Policy towards Chinese technology firms. Those are still months away from being completed. So I think we're sort of in a wait-and-see mode. But I think two main things will determine the future, at least the next 2 or 3 years, of U.S.-China economic relations. First will be how the U.S. weathers the COVID-19 crisis, the economic aspects of that. Now, things are looking somewhat up, but this virus has proven to be very difficult, so we'll have to see if these variants change anything and to what degree the Biden bailout plan that will be signed into law tomorrow has an effect on the U.S. economy. And I think the second thing is to what degree the Biden team will be successful in bringing U.S. partner countries into alliances to take on China in a coordinated fashion. That's something that the Biden administration is putting a lot of stock in. Whether they're successful or not will have a lot to do with how successful the U.S. and China economic relationship is and really what it looks like. Juliet?
COVID and collaboration, we'll have to wait and see. Jim Spellman in Maryland, thank you.
There you go.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, the U.S. Congress passes President Biden's $1.9 trillion stimulus package. How are the markets reacting? We'll have the latest from New York.
Search CGTN Europe wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe to the Agenda podcast. The Agenda with me, Stephen Cole, always gets to the heart of the story. Just subscribe today and listen now.
Covering the world from 4 continents. A new horizon. Teams in Beijing, Washington, D.C., Nairobi, and London. Who connect, interact, and inquire to bring you the stories that matter to all. The Link, only on CGTN.
Don't forget you can sign up to our daily newsletter. We bring you all the top business headlines straight to your inbox. So sign up for free at this address. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. Reminder that CGTN is available to watch for free on all the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, and YouTube, Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app. US markets have soared, with big tech leading the way after Joe Biden achieved the first major legislative victory of his presidency when his $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan was passed by US Congress. Biden is set to sign the bill into law on Friday. And meanwhile, let's talk to our correspondent, John Terrett, who's in New York for us. Hello there, John. Talk us through the market reaction to the relief bill.
Yeah, hey Juliet, hey Jamie. Well, it's a lovely sunny day on Wall Street, I can tell you that, and a very sunny day on the markets as well. They've been spiking, they've been jumping, they've been bouncing, they've been soaring. Choose your adjective, because it's all happening here today. It could have gone either way, though, because, of course, traditionally the markets tend to buy on the rumour and sell on the news, but that hasn't happened today. Odd, though, because we've had some volatility around, particularly in February. The issue was around the 10-year Treasury note called the 10-year bond, which you put money away for 10 years, you get an interest rate back. And it spiked alarmingly on a number of occasions to about 1.6%, which isn't really very much. But the markets are always forward-looking. They were looking to the end of the year, November, December, and saying, well, if it spikes that much that quickly, then we may have higher costs and higher prices at the end of the year. Better sell some stocks. And they sold off on the big tech names, like the FANG names. They were sold off very heavily. Well, now today, with this rally going on, those techs are bouncing back big time, with Tesla pretty much making up the losses of the last couple of the weeks. FANG stocks up 2%. We've also got Boeing up 4%. Salesforce, which is a company that helps you grow and maintain your business online, up 2%. And Apple makes the iPhones in China. Shares up 2% as well. And the Dow is up 1%, the Nasdaq 2.3%, the S&P 500 ahead by 1.3% as of this hour. Juliet.
Well, John, you said I should pick an adjective. I'm wondering if bursting, a bubble that's about to burst, is that the one to pick?
Yeah, come on. I think you know, don't you? I think we all know. I think we know this is a bubble. You know, it really is. But there's a difference. It's a desired bubble. Politicians want it at this time. Just look at Janet Yellen, who is the new Treasury Secretary. She pushed very, very hard for a big rescue package, $1.9 trillion we've got. It's going to be signed into law by Joe Biden on Friday in about 24 hours' time. Joe Biden himself, remember, chaperoning through after the financial crisis of 2008, the $700 billion rescue package for the then U.S. economy under President Biden. And he knows that it turned out, with hindsight, which of course is a wonderful thing, turned out not to be enough. $700 billion was not enough. And in the Obama years, the economy, it recovered, and the president pulled it round, pulled a rabbit out of a hat, as it were. But it never really, you know, took off and caught fire. And Biden remembers that. So that's why he's pushing for this $1.9 trillion package, which he's now got. You can't imagine what $1.9 trillion looks like. It's just too big. But the markets know that literally we've got all this money coming, and a lot of it is going to go into the stock market through the Reddit crowd. We've seen through GameStop and AMC recently. And there's also talk here of the Roaring '20s returning to Wall Street. Can you believe that? They're talking about the Roaring '20s all over again. It will have to be paid for, but right now no one cares who that is or when it is. They just want things to get back to normal. Julia?
Well, John, you might remember the Roaring '20s, but I certainly don't. It's always great catching up. Thanks for the market insight.
Me and Jamie, we do.
Well, Chinese car sales have roared ahead of the rest of the world, with 1.18 million new cars purchased last month. It's a 365% increase on February last year. Sales of so-called new energy vehicles, including battery-powered electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, increased 585%. China is the world's biggest car market. A collapse in demand for Rolls-Royce's jet engines led to pre-tax losses of $5.6 billion for 2020. Much of the UK firm's revenue comes from so-called power by the hour, deals when it's only paid for time its engines spend in flight. The impact of the pandemic on air travel saw revenues tumble 30%. British department store John Lewis has announced losses of $750 million for 2020. The 150-year-old company, which owns supermarket chain Waitrose, says it didn't expect all of its John Lewis shops to reopen at the end of lockdown. It's the latest sign of how COVID-19 has affected UK retail. There has been a demonstration outside the gate of a Bosch factory in France, which makes injectors for diesel engines. Citing diesel fuel's falling popularity, the firm announced 700 job cuts. But workers say they weren't consulted. Bosch insists the sector will not recover and the site only makes diesel-related products.
Eurozone bonds have rallied and European shares are up following a meeting of the European Central Bank. The ECB pledged to preserve favourable financial conditions, speeding up the rollout of its coronavirus stimulus programmes. Ryan Thompson reports now from Frankfurt.
Well, in an increasingly jittery market where many investors are worried about interest rates and a longer than expected recovery time for Europe, there's been a collective sigh of relief after the European Central Bank Board of Governors meeting. The ECB affirmed that it would not reverse course, but actually accelerate its stimulus measures, which are set to continue into the next year. The ECB's so-called main crisis-fighting tool, a multi-trillion-dollar bond-buying program, will be sped up over the next 3 months. And the ECB president, Christine Lagarde, says it will happen as early as Friday. Over the past 2 weeks, the ECB had slowed down the pace of its bond buying, a process which coincided with a global sell-off in bond markets and shaken investor confidence. The ECB says it's looking to prevent any tightening of financing conditions that would hamper the EU's economic recovery from the pandemic. Much of the bloc is still stuck in lockdown, and Germany, where the ECB is actually headquartered, is now facing a so-called third wave. Here's the ECB president speaking earlier.
While the overall economic situation is expected to improve over 2021, there remains uncertainty surrounding the near-term economic outlook, relating in particular to the dynamics of the pandemic and the speed of vaccination campaigns.
Now, investors have also been keeping their eyes on Eurozone interest rates, and the ECB chief says those will remain unchanged. The bank wants to keep them as is until it has a better idea of how global inflation will play out. Ryan Thompson, CGTN, Frankfurt.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, we meet Spain's COVID doctor as the world marks 1 year since the pandemic was declared.
Patient after patient after patient. They take a long time to get better. They're the sickest patients we've ever seen.
It's a race against time because we can all see the threat that our NHS faces, the pressure it's under.
We're dealing with something we knew very little about.
Europe's first 2 epicenters in February have received their first dose of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine.
Another day, another grim milestone for the UK in its fight against COVID-19. 100,000 people have now lost their lives after contracting the virus.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
We can try out the wild and crazy ideas.
Nothing can stop an idea whose time is coming. This idea is coming.
I actually feel quite comfortable in isolation.
We should all be very basic when we're trying to save the world.
Oh, no.
We hope it will happen. We have to live in hope.
The agreement is signed. But what is the real deal now the UK has left the EU? For trade, for business, for the city, for ordinary people. Make sense of Brexit with CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and me, Juliet Mann. Our top stories. The world's biggest political gathering ends as China signs off on its future direction for coming years. China plans sweeping changes to Hong Kong's electoral system, but some Western countries condemn the move. And the EU approves America's Johnson & Johnson single-shot jab, but more countries suspend AstraZeneca's jab. There's mixed news from Europe today on COVID vaccines. Johnson & Johnson's single-shot jab has just won approval from the EU regulators. But Norway has followed Denmark's lead and halted the rollout of the AstraZeneca jab. Our correspondent Tony Waterman joins us now from Brussels. Hi there, Tony. So another vaccine approved, but more issues with supplies and logistics.
Yeah, another vaccine that now brings it up to 4 that have been approved for use here in Europe. And this Johnson & Johnson jab could really be a game changer. It's not quite as effective as some of the other vaccines already in use. So 67% efficacy versus, say, a 94% for Moderna and Pfizer. But it does have some major advantages, the biggest of which is that it's a single shot. So no need to worry about people not coming back for that second dose or having to put aside and reserve these booster shots or having to acquire an additional amount of these just so people can have this second dose. It also is much easier to handle. It does not require those ultra low temperatures that, say, the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine needs. It can be stored in a refrigerator for up to 3 months. But it's still unclear at this point when these vaccines, when these doses are actually going to arrive in Europe. The Commission had originally said in mid-May, but now we're getting reports that it may not, or mid-April rather, but now we're getting reports that it may not be until May, and it also has the potential of pitting Brussels against Washington.
It's been a transatlantic love fest ever since Joe Biden ousted Donald Trump from the White House. But the honeymoon could soon be hit by an ugly reality: the global race to vaccinate against COVID-19. U.S. President Biden has likened it to war, saying now is the time for patriotism.
We're going to start off making sure Americans are taken care of first, but we're then going to try to help the rest of the world.
Biden's America First vaccine strategy could put Washington on a collision course with Brussels. The U.S. is home to one of 3 plants authorized to produce the AstraZeneca jab for Europe. And some doses of the Johnson & Johnson shot will be bottled in the U.S. before being shipped to the EU. Brussels has been left scrambling to ensure the shipments aren't halted.
We have a direct line with the Americans, so we can discuss all issues linked to the supply chain of vaccines, from the first steps to the last ones, including the potential work with the Johnson & Johnson shot.
On Thursday, the European drugs regulator backed the Johnson & Johnson jab, the 4th vaccine approved for use in Europe. A single shot that can be stored in the fridge for 3 months, it could be a game changer for the bloc's stuttering vaccine rollout. Although there are already concerns that not all of the 55 million doses expected in the second quarter will make it. Amid the potential shortfall, Brussels has extended controls on vaccine exports until the end of June, but pushed back against charges of vaccine nationalism, saying only 1 shipment has been blocked, while 34 million doses have been exported to 31 countries.
This shows that the EU continues to be a leading provider of vaccines around the world.
Brussels is betting that a windfall of 300 million doses in the second quarter will alleviate the strain and criticism.
But the bloc's immunization program was dealt another blow on Thursday when Denmark and Norway became the latest countries to temporarily halt the use of the AstraZeneca vaccine after several people experienced severe blood clots and 1 person died. The EU drugs regulator says as of now, there's no clear link between the batch and the blood clots, but it could further undermine the public's confidence in vaccines at a time when politicians are desperate to get jabs in people's arms. And coming in addition to those countries is also Italy now has announced that it's also going to be halting part of that program because of these concerns over these blood clots. 1 person there has now died from complications from getting the vaccine, and this could really undermine this confidence in the public to take these vaccines, Juliette.
Well, meanwhile, lots of European countries are doing side deals, aren't they, to make sure that they get enough of something?
Yeah, that's right. We actually have the Hungarian Prime Minister and also the Prime Minister from the Czech Republic. They're in Israel at the moment, meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to discuss ways and strategies around COVID-19 vaccinations. Hungary was forced to impose these very strict lockdown measures earlier this week. Hospitals in the Czech Republic are buckling under the pressure of this third wave that is just sweeping across Central America at the moment. And it looks as if to a lot of countries here in Europe that Israel is doing something right. It is the global leader right now when it comes to immunization. 100.1 out of 100 people have now received at least one dose of this vaccination. So they're meeting with the Prime Minister to perhaps start striking some of these side deals when it comes to vaccine production or further procurement. Don't forget that Hungary is already using the Chinese vaccine, which has not been approved for use in Europe. And earlier, just last week, actually, Denmark and Austria also went over to Jerusalem to strike their own deal, forming this vaccine alliance, which would help with production of vaccines going forward that will really focus on these emerging and very transmissible mutant variants.
There are issues, but we've come a long way in a year. Tony Waterman in Brussels, thanks for that update.
Well, as we've been hearing, it is 1 year since the World Health Organization declared the coronavirus outbreak a global pandemic. COVID-19 has wreaked havoc around the world, causing death, illness and, of course, economic recession. A year ago, the United Nations agency declared a pandemic as it recorded nearly 4,300 deaths, 118,000 cases and reports of the virus present in 114 countries and territories. A year on, those numbers have climbed dramatically, with 2.6 million deaths recorded worldwide, 117 million confirmed cases, and COVID-19 affecting 219 countries and territories. In the space of a year, the world's scientists have worked around the clock to produce vaccines to fight the virus. More than 268 million doses have already been administered globally. Well, Dr. Margaret Harris is a spokesperson for the World Health Organization and a public health physician. Dr. Harris, good to have your company. 1 year ago, did you think we'd still be where we are 1 year later?
Good afternoon. I certainly hoped we would not have the huge number of cases and particularly the terrible, terrible death toll. What I also hoped, but the thing I did hope but didn't necessarily believe would be possible would be that we have the vaccines or the vaccines we have. And you just read out the numbers which indicated that double the number of people who've developed COVID have already been vaccinated, which is quite extraordinary in just a few months.
I don't know if you heard our earlier report, but Denmark and Norway have halted the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine as a temporary precaution. The world really isn't out of the woods yet.
Well, certainly those temporary halts, and I don't have enough information to give you a really detailed comment, but it is normal when you see any kind of events, you want to ensure that they are not linked to the vaccination. So it is normal to sometimes put a pause just to review that.
I just want your thoughts, while we have you, to talk about the side deals being done on the vaccine. Again, we reported this just a few moments ago. I wonder your views on the EU vaccine rollout and it pushing countries to break the wider EU arrangements for these side deals.
Well, I don't have any specifics on that, but we have made it very clear, and that's why we set up the worldwide arrangement, COVAX, which is open to all countries, rich or poor, doesn't matter where you're from, in order that we can roll these out in a very ordered way, starting with the most at-risk groups, the people most likely to get infected, and also the people who are exposed every day, because these are the healthcare and frontline workers who are out there fighting for us every day. So that's why we set up COVAX, and that's why we keep saying it's in every individual's interest to make sure that everyone is vaccinated in an orderly way at the same time around the world, so that we ensure that everyone's safe. Because as you know, until everyone's safe, no one's safe.
Is COVAX working?
It's certainly beginning to gain momentum. We've had rollouts now to more than 35 countries, and we're seeing it happen every day. And the critical thing is not just getting it to the countries, but part of COVAX is a lot of work on country readiness to ensure that countries, when they receive the vaccines, are actually able to use them and distribute them effectively. And we're seeing that happen.
What have we learned after a year of COVID-19, and how does this bode for the inevitable future pandemic or pandemics?
We've learned that this is a highly transmissible virus, and we've learned that the public health social measures work. So that is the testing, tracing, isolating. Now, the vaccine is a great tool, but it's part of that, and it must all be done together. We've also, of course, learned that in too many people, it can lead to severe disease, and that we need to manage that effectively, identify the people who are going into that severe form. We do now have treatments for that. We have anti-inflammatories, but we don't have a drug yet that can actually kill the virus itself. So we need to do a lot more work on that. But we have certainly seen in the countries where leaders have really galvanized their people, have explained clearly what's to be done and what needs to be done, they have been able to bring their outbreaks right down. And that was before they had access to any vaccines. So we know if we do it all, we can beat this, but it is very hard work.
Dr. Margaret Harris at the World Health Organization in Geneva, thank you very much for coming on the programme.
In the early days of the crisis, Spain was one of the countries hardest hit by the virus. One of the leading figures in its fight back was Dr. Javier Marco. CGTN's Rahul Pathak met him to find out more about the man they call Spain's COVID doctor.
The virus is, I think he's winning. He's winning, but we have a big firearm in our possession. Now we have the vaccine, and I think that is going to change the situation drastically.
A stark assessment of the battle against the pandemic by Dr. Javier Marco, one of Spain's leading figures in the fight against coronavirus. From helping set up the EFEMA Emergency Field Hospital at the height of the crisis, to his current role looking after Spain's first facility specialising in COVID treatment. Dr. Marco has seen firsthand the impact the virus has had, not only on himself, but on his entire profession.
We only talk about COVID, read about COVID, and we are a little tired, physically, emotionally, and intellectually also.
In December, Dr. Marco was placed in charge of the Isabel Zendal, a hospital specialising in COVID treatment. It was another challenge, and not all of it medical.
There has been a lot of controversies around this hospital and its construction. There have been a very bad press that a number of patients didn't want to come here at the beginning. Now we have very good results treating the infection, and we have a very good press again, but the beginning of the hospital was hard on us.
What will be your challenges in the coming months, both personally and professionally?
I'm not young anymore. I'm going to be 62 years old in 4 months, and I want to finish the things that I was doing before coming here, and try to pass my professional occupation to the next generation. That's what I want to do.
Well, before Dr. Marco hands over to that next generation, there's still lots more to be done, and who knows what fresh challenges await him over the next 12 months. Rahul Pathak, CGTN, Madrid.
Well, a year on and a third wave of coronavirus is sweeping across parts of Europe. New infections are surging in France, Germany and the Czech Republic, with hospitals stretched to capacity. Ross Cullen reports.
For the president of Germany's Robert Koch Institute, the situation is not in doubt. We have clear signs the third wave in Germany has already begun, he said. The 7-day incidence rate has risen to 69 infections per 100,000 people in Germany. A month ago, the rate was 64 in 100,000. Now, Thursday marks 1 year since the World Health Organization declared a global pandemic, and much of Europe is still facing mounting pressure in hospitals, increasing coronavirus cases, and vaccination programs which are not running at the pace of the UK, the US or Israel. This time, 1 year ago, France was open and operating as normal. Bars and restaurants were full, theatres and galleries were busy with visitors. But 1 year on, and the country is struggling with a high infection rate, high daily numbers, and although deaths are falling slightly, the change is only small, and there are still on average more than 250 coronavirus fatalities recorded each day. Now, the whole country has been under a nationwide curfew since mid-December, and the government shows no signs of planning to lift it anytime soon. Weekend lockdowns are also in place in some cities in France. The Czech Republic is another country where a national curfew is in place, and it is one of the worst hit countries in Europe when it comes to the infection rate, and all bars, restaurants and hotels are closed, with the only stores that are allowed to open those that sell essential goods such as food or medicine. And one immunologist claimed that so many people have been infected that the Czech population could be on the brink of achieving herd immunity. Ross Cullen, CGTN, Paris.
The United Nations human rights investigator on Myanmar says there is growing evidence that authorities there are likely engaging in crimes against humanity. In the last hour, Thomas Andrews has said that at least 70 protesters have been killed in violence, with over 2,000 people detained. This comes as the Myanmar military has accused Aung San Suu Kyi of accepting gold and $600,000 while she was in government. However, no evidence has been forthcoming.
And can you just let me know, is the royal family a racist family, sir? Very much not a racist family.
Prince William has made a robust rebuttal of his brother's accusations that their family is racist. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, alleged a member of the British royal family, expressed concern over how dark their son's skin might be. William is the first royal to speak publicly about those comments. He also revealed that he hadn't spoken to his brother Harry since the couple gave that television interview. Services have been held across Japan to mark 10 years since a devastating earthquake and tsunami struck the country. Emperor Naruhito led a moment of silence in Tokyo to honor the 18,000 people who died. Most were killed by waves triggered by a magnitude 9 earthquake. The surge of water crippled the Fukushima nuclear power plant, forcing more than 160,000 people to flee their homes. Mexico's lower house of Congress has passed legislation allowing for the recreational use of marijuana. It's part of President Andrés Manuel López Obrador's campaign to wrestle the country from the control of drug cartels. He's argued the legislation will combat drug-related violence and improve security. The bill will now pass to the Senate. A volcano on Indonesia's Sumatra Island has erupted again, spewing clouds of hot ash. The 2,600-metre Mount Sinabung has been rumbling since last year after lying dormant for centuries. About 30,000 people have been forced from their homes, while a 5-kilometre exclusion zone has been put in place.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, we'll be speaking to a unicorn at the centre of a business fairy tale here in London.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Mari, what would you say is a good question?
Stephen, I'd say it's one where there's always more than one answer.
The Answers Project is a new podcast series from CGTN Europe. With me, Stephen Cole.
And me, Mari Beveridge. In each episode, we'll take a complex question.
And with the help of some of the world's foremost experts, shine light on some of the answers. So join us for The Answers Project.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. The UK has a new unicorn. Not a mythical creature with a horn, but a private start-up with a value of more than $1 billion. Zego is the latest company to join the exclusive club. It's disrupting the insurance market by using technology to cover drivers in the gig economy. The firm just raised another $150 million and is now focusing on bigger companies and entire fleets of vehicles.
Well, Sten Saar is the chief executive and co-founder of Zego. He joins us now. Welcome to the show. Lovely to have your company. How did you get here, and what are you planning to do with all this money?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. We started 4 years ago in London, and we've now grown rapidly over the last 5 years. And we've got three main objectives for the money. First, we're going to be developing more products for our customers. Secondly, we're going to be growing the team. We are planning on hiring product people, software engineers, data scientists, and so forth, and currently planning to double the team over the next 12 months. And thirdly, we are going to be expanding geographically. We'll be having a strong geographical expansion in Europe first and then beyond.
Now, insurance, some might say, is one of the world's oldest and perhaps stuffiest, perhaps even most boring businesses. You guys think you can shake things up and you can do things differently, and there's something new to be done here.
Well, I think insurance is now one of the most exciting industries to be in. And absolutely, yes, it's been like this for hundreds of years, and it's about time that we change the insurance to fit today's customer needs. For example, what we are doing, we're offering policies all the way from 1 minute to 1 year, whatever works best for the customer. And especially in the commercial space, when the vehicle is moving, you pay for insurance, and if it doesn't move, you don't pay. It's simple as that. And I think it's about time that we really introduce solutions that fit customers' needs.
It's impossible to do an interview on this programme without talking about Brexit. Let's talk about London. Is it really still the best place for companies like you to do business?
I think so, yes. We started the business 2016 when the Brexit vote happened. So we've been designing the business, making sure that it doesn't have any impact. And to be honest, Brexit has been a bit of a speed bump for us, but that's about it. But London is in a great place, in my opinion, in terms of even from time zone point of view and access to talent, and especially in insurance, because insurance actually started in London like several hundred years ago. And I think it's a great place to be.
Now, you started in Estonia not that long ago. It's worth pointing out your country has an extraordinary record of producing unicorns. I'm thinking of Skype, TransferWise and Bolt. Why is it such a hotbed for startups? What are you doing right? What are they doing right?
Well, I think Estonia doesn't have any natural resources that quite a few other countries have, and hence they need to stand out through other means. I think Estonia, with its tiny population, has an incredibly hardworking, driven, determined people. And then in that case, 1 + 1 = 3. And therefore, I think we see incredible results.
Sten Saar, good luck with the company, and thanks very much for coming on the programme.
Thank you.
China and Russia have announced plans to build a lunar space station, which they say will be available for use by other countries. Russian space agency Roscosmos says it signed an agreement with China's National Space Administration to develop research facilities either on the surface of the moon, in orbit, or both. Su Yen-Soong is the Director General of the Asia-Pacific Space Cooperation Organization. I asked him how important a development this is.
Well, I think this is one of the milestones, I would say, between nations for exploration of outer space, in particular the moon. As China has big ambitions to the moon, we have separated our program into 3 steps, orbiting, landing, and sample return, which has all been successfully conducted through the Chang'e program. And right now we're in the stage of the next phase, which is a lunar base setup human missions and long-term inhabitants. So these are the future 3 steps, and I think these very important international cooperation between China and Russia on the lunar-based cooperation is the profound activity between the 2 nations in space areas.
That's cooperation between China and Russia, but China's National Space Administration is saying that the new station will be open to all interested countries and international partners. So who might be top of that guest list?
Well, I think the traditional partners, or the usual suspect, we call it, is between China and European countries. And I would say the first invitation would go to European Space Agency if the 2 nations, in fact, the 3 nations has been exploring extensively on how to work together in the past, in not only moon mission, but also Mars missions. And the European Space Agency has been cooperating very closely with Russia and China in other areas, and in addition to lunar programs.
What about the United States?
We jointly, with European countries and Russia and US, we set up a roadmap for exploration, and this lead directly to the program called the Gateway for International Partners for the lunar vicinity observations and human missions. And this is cooperation between the 2 nations on multilateral and bilateral basis. And we also certainly hope to explore more possibilities with the new administration on bilateral cooperation and further improve that on non-sensitive areas such as scientific missions and exploration projects.
So we're at Memorandum of Understanding stage. What are the next steps?
Well, the next step is to work together to lay out a plan that is doable for both sides. For example, this can be a robotic mission and lead to future human exploration missions.
Ever left your wallet at home when you've popped out to the supermarket? Well, now one of Russia's biggest food retailers is trialling a scheme that uses facial recognition software to allow people to shop and pay without needing to swipe their card or phone. The system is being tested in 52 shops, but could be expanded to 3,000 nationwide by the end of the year. Find out how it works at europe.cgtn.com.
And finally, albatrosses. They're called seabirds for a rather good reason, as this bird amply illustrates, as he or she tried to land at a nature reserve in New Zealand. If it's any consolation to our avian friend, this bird is now a global online superstar.
The headlines again. The world's biggest political gathering ends as China signs off on its future direction for the coming years. And the EU approves America's Johnson & Johnson's single-shot dose jab. But there's bad news for AstraZeneca as Norway moves to ban it. That's it for Global Business Europe. Thanks for watching. More on all of our stories at europe.cgtn.com, and do follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.
We're on smart TV apps like Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, on YouTube and Dailymotion, as well as CGTN.com and the CGTN app. Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.